Hello, sports exercise students. We are going to be looking at information processing for lesson number 5 today, and we're going to continue our conversation at looking at selective attention and memory, and then moving into reaction time and how we improve our reaction time and why it's really important in the whole system of information processing. So before we even do any of that, what I'd like for you to do is go back and take a moment to look at the very beginning of our unit, look at your notes, look at the reading, and review all of the concepts regarding Welford's model and Whiting's model and the steps along the way and all the components that we've looked at up till this point. Go ahead and pause the video. I'll give you a few minutes, and when you're ready, unpause the video and you can continue on. So, we've already talked about what selective attention is, and we know what memory is, but now we have to discuss what's the relationship between both of those things. I'd love for you to take a minute to, again, talk with your neighbor, think about what you do and don't know. Now you can pause the video here, just have a quick conversation with your shoulder partner as to what is selective attention, what is memory, and what's the relationship between the two in the context of information processing. Again, pause the video, take a couple minutes, and then continue on. So now that you guys have had a conversation, see if you can look at the following statements and put them in a logical order. Once you've done that, as a class, share with other groups what you chose, why you chose it, and if it makes sense or not. Feel free to debate as you go along. You can pause the video here if you so choose. So, selective attention takes place after information has entered short-term memory, and it's really important for processing generally all information. Our individuals will focus on relevant information while they ignore irrelevant information, right? So we could filter out the ball, which would be relevant information, from noise, or the ball boys in tennis, which is irrelevant information, so that we're only focusing on the relevant information that we're going to act upon. Decisions are made on what action to take as unselected stimuli are filtered out, and selected stimuli are going to be compared to information stored in our long-term memory. So selective attention doesn't always work. It can, example here, it can attend to like a dummy arm movement in rugby when players should be focusing on their hips or their legs or their footwork. And we can improve selective attention with training, practice, and learning. I think in closing, for understanding the relationship between the two, it's really important for processing both fast and slow responses, especially in games that have, if you have a game that's less time for the performer to correct the action in a fast-paced game, so getting it wrong shows up way more clearly. In slow sports, still need selective attention for a good performance. Our capacity to process information has a lot of limitations. So that's why we teach and we coach. Let's move on. So how does an athlete improve memory? There's lots of different ways for us to improve memory. Here is a list. We can rehearse, encode, use brevity, use clarity, chunking, organization, association, and practice. For the next few minutes, I would like for you to provide a definition for each of these by using your own research tools and give an example of what this might look like in sports or in athletics for a performer. Take no longer than 15 or 20 minutes at the most, and then continue on in the video. You can pause it here at this point. Remember, the whole purpose of improving our memory is to help our short-term memory connect to our long-term memory store. Most adults can store between 5 and 9 items in their short-term memory. and really, so I guess our average would be about 7 items, because that's how many slots we have in our brain in theory. So we could, for example, talk about clarity and brevity. Brevity is just giving a learner a small amount of information at a time so that they're not overloaded. And clarity is avoiding trying to learn, or teach too similar. It's avoid trying to learn or teach two similar but distinct items in one session. So as the memory of one thing might interfere with the memory of the other. So instead of teaching 2 moves, you just teach 1 move at a time. So go through and take a look at all your notes and see what you might come up with. So here's a sample test question. This is from an IB exam from a couple of years back. It states, outline 2 methods which can be employed to improve a person's memory. It's worth 2 points. Can you list off 2? Here are lots of examples for you. Brevity, which is something we just spoke about. Clarity, another one we just spoke about. Chunking, where you can hold more in our short-term memory if the information is broken down into small pieces. We could look at organization, where we remember more easily if we organize the information in a way in which we are going to learn it or ensure the information is meaningful, using a lot of imagery in this particular case. OWTTE means or words to that effect. The use of association, practice, coding. Each one of these would be worth a point for you. In regards to encoding, when information comes into our memory system from a sensory input, it needs to be changed into a form that the system can cope with so that it can be stored. So think of this like changing your money into a different currency when you travel from one country to another. So, for example, a word which we would see on the whiteboard may be stored if it is changed or encoded into a sound or a meaning. We call that semantic processing. So we can encode from visual, which would be pictures, acoustic, which would be sound, or we could use the idea of writing things down phonetically, or sounding out the word, or visually writing it down. Okay, why is response time important? We'll be looking at 5.2.8 and 5.2.9. Lots of information here. I'm going to let you start and stop the video to obtain any notes that are relevant for these 2 assessment statements. Both are very self-explanatory. If you have any questions, we can address them in class. Take a moment to look at what is response time, the next 2 slides. Just by looking at the diagram here, you should be able to understand a basic idea of what reaction time is. Pause the video to take a moment to review the diagram. So what do these mean? Response time equals the reaction time plus movement time. Sorry about the interruption. So, going back, I need to help you understand what each of those are. So what is reaction time? What is response time? What is movement time? How do we actually define each one of these? So response time is basically the time between the onset of a stimulus and the initiation of a response. And it's the time the information processing system takes to interpret the situation, perhaps formulate the motor program, and then transmit the information to a muscular system. So an example here, the time taken when a striker thinks they have the opportunity to score a goal and the start of the shooting action for that goal. The movement type, that's going to be the time between the start of the movement and its completion. So it's the time the performer takes to physically complete the movement when the muscular system has received the message from the brain via our effector system or our effective nervous system. So an example here would be the time it takes the striker to move their limbs to strike the ball. And both of those combined will create our response time, basically the time from the onset of the stimulus to the completion of the movement. And it's a combination of both. So the overall time the striker took to complete the shot from first seeing the ball, recognizing their position, and actually demonstrating the goal or striking the ball. So moving forward now, how is reaction time affected? So we'll let you take a few minutes to jot down notes over the next few slides. So you'll need to pause the video and recognize these factors that would affect reaction. Be careful that you do not confuse response time and reaction time. So we're focusing on how is reaction time affected. Feel free to pause the video here and jot down any notes. Moving forward, feel free to pause the video here and jot down these 4. Moving forward, here are the last 4. Moving forward. In closing today, we really have 2 forms of reaction time. One is a choice and one is a simple. And we would, choice reaction time is a little bit more complicated and takes longer. And is a little bit more demanding because we're taking multiple stimuli and trying to figure out which one we're going to use. The simple reaction time is going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. 1 response to 1 stimulus. And note that the audible stimuli are typically a lot quicker in reaction time than visual stimuli. Choice reactions are way more common in sports because we have to make choices in every decision we make. And we're taking a lot of information to do those things. And typically, the experienced performer has a much quicker choice reaction time than a novice, as you know, because we can recall that information from our memory bank. So I hope this has been an informative lesson for you. Thanks very much for listening. I'll see you in lesson number 6.